everyone, welcome back to the channel. Now when I made this channel, the whole point of it was that it was about things that I'm actually interested in, devices that excite me, stuff that I want to talk about. So apologies for the big delay. I've been waiting for this to arrive as well as the Retroid Pocket 5, which is now here. But I am so excited about this. This is one of the best devices that I have used in ages. It is the TrimUi brick, and you've probably heard quite a bit about it at this stage. Now, as you know, we gave away one of these in the last episode. I was kindly sent a couple of those by Ambinic, so happy days. We've still got one as a comparison device. And look at the size difference between the TrimUi brick and the RG40XXV. So let's go through the design then. As you can see, it is a handheld vertical device, very small in size, as we just saw, compared to another excellent device. Most of this is actually standard ABS plastic, but you might notice that actually the top here is metal. You're looking at 156 grams, so quite a light little thing, although it doesn't feel cheap. And it also has RGB lighting, which is tied through the UI to the different emulators. So for example, when you use PlayStation, it may be green, Amiga, it might be another color, and that's a nice little touch. You've also got a different set of buttons, depending on what ones you like. You can actually switch these in and out. Another nice touch. You'll also notice that we have another USB-C port on the back here. I imagine that's so that you can charge while using it like this, so that it's not right here at the bottom where the first one is. And also you'll see a 3.5mm jack and a single micro SD card slot. This device, or this one, was provided with a 256 gigabyte card I should say. And then on the side of the device we've got a couple of interesting things, including a customizable quick toggle switch and the power button. We'll also go into why that's there, another great design choice. This display, believe it or not, is actually 1024 by 768, which is really impressive, with a 4:3 aspect ratio, which for this form factor, again perfect, 3.2 inches, it's IPS, but this can get nice and bright. Internally, we've got that all-winner A133P running at 1.8 gigahertz, which is a surprisingly good chip. It's not one that I've come across before. It's not a chip that I'm familiar with, but it runs, as we will see, very well indeed. And in terms of that GPU, we've got an Imagination Power VR GE8300, and that runs at 660 megahertz. As far as RAM, well, it's 1 gigabyte of LPDDR3. Battery then, well, we're sealed in. You will have to remove these four, potentially all of them if you're going to remove the battery. But this is a 3000 milliamp hour battery that can provide between 5 and 6 hours of playtime, depending on the mode that you're running it in, as we'll see. It has two front firing speakers down the bottom here, and also a series of buttons which serve different operations for this UI. And that UI that we've just discussed is the TrimUi stock OS that also has MinUI as an alternative if you want to swap that out. You can see it's very similar to the TrimUi Smart Pro, but everything is so small because the resolution of this tiny screen is incredibly high for its size. That benefits a lot of games in terms of the visual quality that you're going to get out of it. But you know what the most impressive thing for me about this is actually the games that it comes loaded with. Now, I'm always looking for a device that I can just boot up and enjoy my favorites. And it feels like whoever made this knew what games I'd love. It has handheld systems and other home systems that I haven't seen on any of these before. For example, the Amiga. Now, if we head through, you can see, I won't read them all out, but I will just buzz through so that if you want to have a look at everything it's got on it, it's got an incredible amount of different systems, less known ones, more niche systems. It's also got ports of big games. It's got PC in the form of something like Scum VM, so it takes a lot of those DOS games, Sega Saturn, Video Pack, and we're all the way back round to Amiga. There's also a theme overlay, and the themes have a musical element to them as well as the lighting changes. With things like Fallout, you know, so you get the Fallout soundtrack playing as you browse, it has a real feeling of identity, this device, which surprises me a lot. You do also have Wi-Fi, you've got Bluetooth, you've got the RGB lighting that I mentioned, and you do have a vibration motor as well, so you can have vibration feedback in some games. Now, this key here is programmable, but by default, it'll basically be full performance down, slightly less performance up, but much better battery life. So I've been keeping that down, and it makes a massive difference for a lot of the games, but you don't need it for all of them. Things like the Amiga you just won't need. Now, as I was just saying, the reason I love this so much is it comes with so many of my favorite games. But out the box, I haven't seen a device that comes with so many of my favorites. In fact, I'm struggling to think of a game on an emulator that I would want to play that isn't available on the emulators that we've got here. Now, as for performance, well, again, really surprising. The chipset on here I haven't used before, as I say, but the irony of the name Allwinner, I mean, it is exactly that. Let's have a look at some of the more demanding ones. Even things like the N64 sometimes can be a bit of a problem, can't they? But that's not the case here. They just run brilliantly. So let's just start at the deep end, shall we? Start with the PSP. So the first thing to say about PSP performance is it's exceptional. It really is. Again, for the size of the device, you're getting here maxed out 30 FPS almost all the time, and that's in most games. Even things like God of War, I was able to play that quite well. Again, not as high frame rate as this, but still very good for that title. And that seems to be the case across most of the games that you would play. What's also interesting is that these games are using just the D-pad, and by using a combination of these buttons here, you can access almost any emulator because it will switch the functionality of the D-pad. So if I'm on the Amiga and I need to use the mouse, I press this button and then this will be usable as a mouse. If I'm in another emulator, I press it again, it will then rotate, and that's the case across all of them. As you can see, we really are getting solid performance for such a demanding game and a really demanding system. So this chipset is one of the best I've seen in a long time. I'm getting annihilated here, but still. I really like the combat of this game, the Crisis Core game. I think actually the remake they did, I'm not sure I like the combat quite as much, I have to be honest. Now obviously if you don't have this on, then you notice a massive hit in performance. As soon as you turn this off, games will just chug and stutter, at least the more demanding 3D ones. Still, as I say, you don't need it if you want those games to last a long time. Now, in some of those more demanding games as well, I mentioned the metal back, and it feels like this is almost acting as a heat sink. The first device I was sent actually came with another piece of metal, and I'm assuming that you can change this part out. And the reason, again, maybe is because it does get quite warm. So when you've got everything running at full tilt, just by the nature of, well, physics, it's very small, it's very compact, but it's running at high chipset speeds and it's running demanding games, it's going to get warmer. Thankfully, most of that isn't around this area where your hands are. It's going to be above you. However, if a finger touches this when you're using these buttons at the back, you're certainly going to know about it. On the subject of these, they're a little, they feel a little nondescript, a little like smooshy. That's the only way I can describe it. They're not, you never quite feel like you've clicked them. You know, they're not super clicky, but they're also not resistant. They're in an unhappy middle place. They do the job just fine, and actually ergonomically they're quite nice because you've got this slight arc on them. But in terms of feel, they're not great. As far as pricing goes, well, it can be anywhere. It depends where you're looking. If you're getting the retail prices here in the UK, you could pay anywhere from around 60 to 90 pounds. But if you're going onto things like AliExpress, Well, I'll show you some examples on the screen. It's one of those, a bit like the R36S, that if you could find it at the right price, then like it's an easy pickup. But I would honestly say, even at full price, if you were paying £60–70, this is a great handheld. It really is. Gets nice and loud, has that high resolution screen. I was always of the mind that you need to have an analog stick, but really I haven't needed to at all on this. As you can see from GTA, Chinatown Wars, performance is exceptional. Again, you're looking at 30 frames per second, completely locked out across the game. It never drops, it's almost perfect. The same goes for the sound as well. In high performance mode, this really can handle PSP very well indeed. Now I mentioned that it has several ports available as well, and those are some of my favourite games. You've actually got Balatro on here, which just came out. Brilliant. Amazing game, very interesting take on the roguelite formula that uses like deck building. But you've also got classics on here like Celeste, which this is, and they're running at 60 frames per second. As I mean, you would hope they would do, but still, it's impressive that we've got it here for this price, all in one package. You've got a load on there. Things like Doom are also emulated on there, Duke Nukem 3D. You've got proper versions. There's also Fallout 1 and 2 on here by default, which is amazing. Some of the best games ever made. GTA 3, Vice City, all of them are on here in full versions. Half-Life, it's got the full version of Half-Life on here.
You must report to Black Mesa personnel for processing before you will be permitted into the high security branch of the transit system.
So Half-Life runs absolutely flawlessly. I know it's an older game, but I do remember sat on my PC playing this one, just blown away by the visual quality of that intro area that I'm on at the moment, riding along on the train, just seeing this amazing Source engine. But this runs at 60 frames per second here on this tiny little handheld. I just can't really get over that. Like, every time I put it next to another pretty small device, it just blows my mind that this is possible. Other emulators obviously include things like the PlayStation that also runs absolutely flawlessly. I was playing Blood Omen Legacy of Kain the other day, just loving it. But then we have Dreamcast as well, so that's probably the most interesting one in terms of performance. Crazy Taxi is always just a good game to use for that, because we kind of know how that benchmarks and runs on other systems. Let's see how it performs in Crazy Taxi. So then, as you can see there, performance is brilliant. Now there are a few little quirks, you might get a few bugs as well. I've had a couple where like the vibration doesn't stop. You might even be able to hear that. I've managed to get that stuck on a couple of times, but that seems to be okay as soon as you actually exit out of the game. As far as the Dreamcast performance goes, it's brilliant. Performance here on the N64 is also very solid. No real issues there, a couple of audio stutters, but nothing to write home about. Generally, really does hold up nicely, and you probably saw at the start there, I was unable to control it because this was in D-pad mode. As soon as I pressed this button, we could roll over to analog stick mode and obviously skip past the mouse mode. It's really nice having that functionality. This UI also automatically saves every time you exit a game, so that it will instantly reload when you go back in. Just for usability, that's a great idea, and you can switch that off if you don't like it. You've even got Discworld 1 and 2, some of the best games ever made. Flight of the Amazon Queen. So if you're a point and click adventure fan, it's just great on here, it really is. Even using the D-pad as a mouse works perfectly. Full Throttle, if you remember that game, that's on here as well. And you'll see how, as I said before, These LEDs all light up in a different color to match the emulator you're using. They've got that scum green. So it's just nice, isn't it? Nice touch. And you really do notice that almost 720p screen. I think it's like, what, 1024, 768, the old classic 4:3 aspect ratio we had on PC. You really see it in games like this. Looks stunning.
Fixed your door.
It really is almost my perfect device that I've used so far. Cracking lineup of games. Now, aside from emulators, there are a couple of nice features to this UI that are worth talking about. We've got the best tab, which basically organizes games by a genre. So we've got the best vertical shmups, we've got Zelda titles, Cowabunga collection, and that's all the games that are on that collection just in their respective systems, Sonic Classic collection, etc, etc. So if I go over to apps, you've got your app section, which is where you can control the function key. So it doesn't have to be set to the CPU performance, you can set it to a few different things. You've also got Moonlight, so you can actually cloud stream games to this device directly from your PC. I mean, I don't really think this form factor suits that too well, if I'm honest, especially with the controls. But still, if you want to do that, you can. You can change the boot logo. There's a media player for videos. Again, something that I don't think most people with a mobile phone are going to use, but it's nice that it's there. And there's an over-the-air update, so you can update it over Wi-Fi, which is great. There's an ebook reader on here as well, and just a file manager so that you can manage any of your emulators, put new files on it, fix all of that, scrape your art using Wi-Fi as well, straight from the internet. It has a screen recording function, which would be perfect for me making these videos. If I wasn't so lazy, I'll just record it on screen. Overall, my takeaways are this. In terms of pros, performance is outstanding. Really impressed by the performance for the size of the device. Way more than I expected, honestly. The build I like and I dislike. So I think the ergonomics of it are actually quite good considering its very small size. I like the buttons on the side for the volume. The rear buttons, they don't feel the best, but actually they're quite nice quality. I like the LED lighting system. I think this is one of the few examples where it actually works, it makes sense, and it is tied to what you're actually doing with the device. The buttons themselves, things like the D-pad, that's really nice. Although it's smaller, I do like these TrimUi D-pads. I think it's good. They obviously don't have the rubbish little analog sticks anymore, and I can live without it. While it has this programmable button, not bad at all. This all makes sense down the bottom. Menu key, start and select, absolutely fine. And the A, B, X and Y, they also feel very nice. It's a good bit of resistance. They have a quality feel to them. This metal section makes sense for me in terms of getting heat away from the CPU when you're running intensive things, but the device can get a touch hot if you're holding it like this. But it's still, you know, the best with the space that they've got. It has a very square look to it, doesn't it? And I don't mind that. The screen itself isn't as nice as the RG40XXV. It's just not as close in terms of the distance, you know, the panel from the glass, etc. But it is still very good. And having the high resolution on the very small screen, I thought it would be unnecessary, but it looks brilliant. It really does hold up nicely. Now we can crank that up to its full brightness. It doesn't make a huge difference on there, honestly, but you've also got a few different other options that you can customize. This is a really nice thing about this UI. You can actually change the contrast and the saturation. Now everyone likes things differently. You've got your Samsungs of the world where everything's oversaturated, and you've got your iPhones where it's less so, but still quite oversaturated. You can actually tailor that, and then it will apply to the whole UI and all your games, which is really good. I like to bump the contrast, reduce the brightness, and you can really make things look nice and sharp. The volume's also very good, and I love the themes. I think the themes is a great idea. So for me, I've got to be honest, the TrimUi brick is the best handheld that I've used all year. This is my favorite. I've probably used about 10 at this point, not as many as others, but for my tastes, the games that I like, the way that I want things to perform straight out the box, this is my absolute favorite. Like, it's lovely, lovely device. That's not to say that some of the others aren't good. I mean, I've got these random ones like the Gament, which is, let's be honest, it's an absolutely hideous looking thing. But as far as convenience, out the box use, this for me is just almost perfect. I love this device. way beyond my expectations. If you're considering just one this Christmas, this should be on your to consider list, in my opinion. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you guys have a good Christmas. Now that I've got all these devices, I can actually get you more videos out. But as I always like to say, if you enjoyed the content, then consider hitting continue.